I guess it's a little bit of a follow-up, because I think that the ability for Trump to tap into this kind of vile racism and sexism was obviously real. But I'm also wondering what it would have been like with an actual alternative, because there just seemed to be an enormous disconnect. I live in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia was a contested swing state, or Pennsylvania, and the commercials from Trump and Clinton were insane. I mean, Trump had these dystopic commercials about corporations, corporate America is stealing your job, is ruining your life. I mean, all of it that we can look back retrospectively is, a load of crap. But at the time, in the midst of the campaign, that was contrasted to Clinton's ads, which were all about, would you want Trump as a role model? Which, no, but would you want Bill Clinton in the White House as a role model either? To what extent might they cancel each other out? But it spoke to a larger issue about the lack of a real alternative. And Michelle, you wrote an article, I'm not sure if it was seen as controversial or not, for The Nation last year in the midst of the primary with between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, where you essentially argued that Clinton didn't deserve the black vote because of the Clinton legacy with law and order politics. And so, obviously not controversial here. And so I'm just wondering if you could say something about that in the context of, yes, there are these extreme issues with Trump and what he was able to tap into, but what is it in terms of an alternative that the Democratic Party does not seem to offer that leaves a political void in terms of where it is that people are supposed to go?
Well, I wrote that article right after the New Hampshire primary. It was very, very early in the primaries as Hillary Clinton was preparing to go south to South Carolina to go get the black vote. Right. And I was deeply troubled by the media coverage around how the Clintons basically had the black vote in their back pocket.
Firewall.
And it was her firewall. Right. And, as someone who had spent more than a decade working on issues related to mass incarceration, and had also spent years representing victims of racial profiling and police brutality, and who had worked with people who were directly victimized by the policies of the Clinton era, people who were evicted from their homes as a result of Clinton's one strike and you're out policy, people who could not return home to their families because of the Clinton administration's rule, barring people with criminal records from public housing, making it possible for people returning home from prison to have nowhere to go. The Clinton administration's support for the ban on even food stamps for people who were convicted of drug felonies. And, it was difficult for me to watch Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton going into black churches and being welcomed, and all of the fanfare surrounding them in the black community, knowing that black incarceration rates soared during his administration, that he embraced the war on drugs and escalated it beyond what his Republican predecessors had even dreamed possible, and that millions of people were now trapped in a cycle of criminalization, unable to find work or housing or even to feed their families. During the Clinton administration, I was a mentor to a young girl whose family was rendered homeless as a result of the once striking her out policy. And I could hardly stand to watch it. And it wasn't just my frustration with the uncritical embrace of the Clintons. It was my frustration with the black community's uncritical embrace of the Democratic Party. And, you know, I would often be told, well, you know, during the 1990s, there were so many black people who wanted Get Tough. They were also calling for harsh mandatory minimum sentences or more police. And so you cannot blame the Clintons for getting on the Get Tough bandwagon, because there were so many black activists and people in those communities who wanted, you know, more police and more prisons. And, you know, if the Clinton administration and if the Democratic Party as a whole had only gotten on board with the Get Tough movement while also investing heavily in our schools, if they had also invested in child welfare and economic investment in our neighborhoods and job training programs for those who had been left behind as a result of deindustrialization, if any of that had actually happened along with the Get Tough, lock 'em up and throw away the key mentality, then maybe I might have understood. But no, what we saw during the Clinton era was police and prisons, investment by tens of millions of dollars flowing into police and prisons, while the Clinton administration ended welfare as we know it, dismantled aid to families with dependent children, slashing funding for public housing while, you know, putting billions into building new prisons. And so it was the Democratic Party's willingness to embrace wholeheartedly the right-wing agenda on race, crime, taxes, and the end of big government that I found deeply troubling. And if every time, you know, a Democratic politician who is willing to sing in black churches or play the saxophone or do whatever, if that's all it takes to get our vote, we'll never be free.
Right.
And so that is why I wrote the piece.
That is great.